In the previous exercise, we made a request via the HTTP client and ensured that the URIs were /venues or weather, anything else would generate an error. Then we wanted to route the request to a specific target endpoint, and therefore we created route rules. And then we added assigned message policies to ensure that the path suffix was pruned before the call was made to the target. Now let's go ahead and add a few more policies and also see what happens when we add response cache to the response side of the API processing pipeline. If you try to add the response cache policy directly to the conditional flow, you'll see that it's not highlighted and you can't add it. We've got to go to the pre-flow and add the response cache policies there. We will add both, one for venues, one for weather, and then we'll move them into the conditional flows. The response cache policy also gets attached to the target endpoint response side. We'll see that shortly. But let's go ahead and add the response cache for venues as well. Let's go ahead and see what's being done to the target endpoint. When we go to the target endpoint, the pre-flow has the assigned message policy that we implemented before. And the post-flow on the response side is what we see. So target endpoint response post-flow is where we see an associated response cache that has been deployed as well. Now this response cache is of course the weather one for the default target endpoint. And if we go to the Foursquare target endpoint, same thing. When we go to post-flow, we see a response cache policy there, and it is the one that's associated with the incoming request as well. But of course, we've got work to do. This is not right. So we want to take these two policies and actually attach them to the conditional flows. Let's remove them from here and then go to the conditional flow. On the weather one, we will add the response cache one. And then we'll do the same for venues. Let's make some calls to see how the response cache policies are triggered. Let's go to Postman. Let's fire a call and see what Apigee tells us. In the call that we do see, we see that weather did not match because we invoked the venues API. Venues did match. Response cache policy was triggered. There was nothing in the cache. The request was made to the server. And the response cache policy was triggered again, but this time on the response side, and that is to cache the request. So now we should make a few additional calls. Let's see what these other calls did. Remember that your deployment may have multiple message processors, and therefore they all need to cache the responses. So let's go see what happens. Of course, this is our first request. The second request, hey, response cache, there was a hit. And because there was a hit, the server wasn't called. The data from the cache was picked up and returned to the caller. On the next one, same thing. And in this case, all of our requests went to the same message processor, hence there was no need to make a request to the target. You think that we may be done with the response cache policies, but we're not, because there is a problem. One, when you look at the response cache policies, yes, when the request is a get on /weather, that's when our policy is fired. So that's a good thing. But on the response side, the policy is always exercised. So on the response side, we don't have any protection to ensure that the response is cached only for get. Any other operations are ignored.